Hi, my name is Jenna Preston, and today we are going to be discussing the beautifully written memoir Just Kids by Patti Smith. Patti Smith is an American artist, writer, poet, and musician. In this memoir, she reflects back to her life in New York City in the early 60s to the late 80s, and she talks about her life there with fellow artists and musicians before eventually meeting Robert Mapplethorpe. Whether Patti is performing sets with her band or working side by side with literacy icons, Patti Smith has curated a role in our arts and music culture unlike any other. Before Patti Smith, women in rock had presented themselves in such a conventional way compared to male musicians. As these photos show, Smith's persona was brand new. No female rocker has ever dominated images and music in such an aggressive, uncompromising way. In this memoir, Patti talks about when she first met Robert in New York City during the 60s until they parted in the 80s. During this time, New York was the scene for all artists to come and become inspired by each other and the visuals of the city. Anyone who had interest and wanted to make a career out of their work would come to share their art, photography, and music. It was truly the hub for anyone who wanted to make it. This side of the city is perfectly described as Patti begins telling her story about how she first moved to New York, but was basically sleeping on the street, wasn't eating, and was barely making any money. Then she was introduced to Robert. Together, they were able to build a life together and make their art, drawings, music, and poetry while still promising to keep the relationship strong. This story follows Patti and Robert for years trying to make it in New York. Though this is the general idea, this book is much more beautiful than just the journey of two people forming a career from the ground up, but it really dives into the emotional stories of their lives. You really get to discover the process of beautiful art and everything that goes into the mind and everyday life of an artist, which is so important to know before artists become well known. We meet some great singers in this memoir, such as Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan, Andy Warhol, and Madonna. Just so many people that Patti and Robert got to meet. Even with all their relationship obstacles, whether you consider their relationship romantic, platonic, or even maternal, Robert begins to confront his sexuality while Patti already came out as bisexual, but their love never becomes distant. Just Kids makes a convincing case that faith in another person's form of expression can form a bond as strong as any physical or emotional relationship. Sadly, in the 1980s, Robert passes away from AIDS, and this is a tribute to their well-spent life together and overall interesting relationship. They started off as lovers, but ended up being lifetime companions and muses for artwork. It was a very interchangeable relationship between the two, as Patti goes along and marries a man named Fred, but her and Robert remain friends. Call it best friends even, as they have an emotionally tied relationship together. This book is such a beautiful visual of what a relationship should look like, whether it's platonic or romantic. At the beginning of the book, I could already see the ending come along, and it was so emotional reading how Patti perfectly described Robert and so effortlessly. Their love story developed into such an eternal connection. It was amazingly described how well they agreed on life views, religion, and ideas, and just how much they shared overall. Truly remarkable communication between two souls. Patti Smith continues talking about the journey of becoming an artist as she goes into detail on how an artist gets inspiration, how she's able to write her poems and lyrics, and how drawings are started. She talks about how Robert takes his photographs and how sometimes she is the model for his photos. She also talks about the struggles, but gracefully admires the beauty that comes with it. This memoir is truly so poetic and lyrical, and Patti Smith is by far one of my favorite writers that I've discovered so far. I love the way this was written, and she has this power of making writing sound like a song. Another thing that this book really explored beautifully was the nature of human relationships and how we are really connected with others in our lifetime. She talks about what defines a relationship and the rules that come along with it. It also explores topics such as endless youth and the hope for a future, the motivation, the drive, the craziness, and the determination of wanting to work towards something. So many beautiful sentences, so many beautiful ideas, and the words truly hit you in the heart. She is absolutely genius when it comes to crafting nostalgia in writing, and you find yourself being nostalgic even though it's not even your story to tell. However, you feel such a connection to this book that it's hard not to feel like you've been there. I see the images in this book, I see the visuals she has created for the readers, and feel as if I'm a part of it. I don't think anyone else could pay tribute to a death of a loved one as Patti Smith did. Before Robert passed away, Patti actually promised that she would write their story in a book, and she did so perfectly. Throughout, there are tons of personal memories scattered throughout, such as short poems, drawing, smaller sketches, Polaroids, and it really just adds to the personality of the story. Towards the end, there is a lot of visual support as we see Robert's memorial card after he died, and there is a lot of photography, and it truly immerses you into New York City during that time. You're able to visualize how vibrant the city is with all of the rock and roll, the pop art, graffiti, and even introduced to some indie artists. It's just an amazing adventure. This book definitely makes you think about all the loved ones in your life currently and all of the moments that you have shared with them so far. You begin questioning how you would look back on those moments and write about the times you spent with them and how you're going to feel once they're gone. While reading, you're definitely going to be emotionally tied to this book and full of thoughts. It's just so heartwarming and special, and you're going to be looking at life completely differently after finished reading because you really don't know how long you have with loved ones. This book teaches you to value all the memories you've created before things change. Just Kids by Patti Smith rightfully got the National Book Award. I completely understand why. This book might be for you, it might not be, it all truly depends. But I think the emotional discharge in this book is so strong and powerful that it could speak to anyone reading it. I feel as if anyone can relate to at least one thing talked about throughout this, whether that be about passion, the human relationships that we form in our lives, career paths, struggling, poverty, death, or even adventure in a big city. Thank you for listening to my thoughts on Just Kids by Patti Smith, and I really hope you consider picking this book up